What's up guys, Lifting here. With Blight League we got a handful of new skills. Many of those were related to the Necromancer and Summoner rework, but we also had a few specifically related to the Poison Assassin archetype. And in this video I'm going to talk about my early experience as a teenage boy hitting puberty, my experience trying out Cobra Lash and how the skill feels while leveling and as you get into maps. But first, my dear patrons and channel members, thank you very much for making this work. Cobra Lash, let's break it down. Cobra Lash is a projectile and chaos-based attack skill. It's not a spell and it's not a melee skill. It only works with either daggers or claws, which we'll talk more about later. At gem level 20, it deals up to 125% of weapon base damage with up to 125% effectiveness of added base damage too, which is a way of indicating how effectively external sources of damage such as added chaos damage applies to this skill. It is also worth noting that the skill has 120% base attack speed, and as the skill levels, it also benefits from additional flat chaos damage being applied to its attack, with another 50% of any physical damage you deal, such as from your weapons for instance, being converted into chaos damage. So if you have a dagger that on average delivers 200 physical DPS, a half of that will be chaos damage. The skill starts out by being able to chain up to 3 times at level 1 with 5 chains at gem level 20. Any critical strike made with this skill receives a solid 50% damage over time multiplier for poisons. And finally, the skill alone provides 40% chance to poison on hit. So what does this all mean? It means that this skill is a prime candidate for anyone wanting to play a poison based skill, as it is very easy to hit 100% chance to poison on hit by just pairing Cobra Lash with the poison support gem. And since poison damage can be applied by either physical and or chaos damage, the physical damage conversion, the flat added chaos and high damage effectiveness of added damage practically begs you to focus on the poison aspect of the skill and scale the damage that way. So when you look at the skill description alone, it would almost be a waste to not at least in some form or another to build around poison scaling with this skill. Which is also what I've done on my first character here in Blight League. I picked the Assassin to further capitulate on the poison damage modifying potential it offers. So before I tell you how the skill overall feels to play with, let's first talk about how you scale a poison based Cobra Lash. Now this of course depends on your build, but there are a few general guidelines that should hold true to most setups. For weapons, speaking in broad terms, you preferably want a claw or dagger with high physical damage and flat added chaos damage. That is like the 2 core affixes you want to pull on to directly increase your overall and poison damage. Then on top of that, you'd preferably want to have an attack speed roll. This is because you can stack as many poisons as you want on an enemy, with the limiting factor being how fast you can apply them before they expire. So faster attacks, more poison stacks. If you're playing a crit based version, a critical strike change roll is of course always welcome too. And you can also do something pretty interesting with the Perfect Agony Keystone or the Corralito Signature Flask, where you apply your critical strike multiplier and allows it to scale poison damage, although at a 50% value of the total crit multiplier. Still, this can be very powerful with enough crit multiplier, but it is of course also a more build specific way of scaling the damage. Besides that, there is of course the increased with poison and poison duration modifiers that you can roll on the weapons too. And while getting a well-rolled dagger or claw can be expensive, we are, however, so fortunate that both daggers and claws have relatively cheap unique items that are fully capable as endgame weapons for this skill too. For claws, I'd recommend you look into the Mortem Morsu level 34 claw and later the Wasp's Nest level 60 claw. Since I went daggers, I relied on simply crafting physical damage onto a pair of level adequate daggers, and you can do the same for claws too of course. And these carried me until level 30, where I bought 2 Mightflay daggers, and finally as I reached level 65 I bought 2 Bino's Kitchen knives, and I expect these to carry me the rest of the way through the game. The nice thing about daggers is that they currently have the benefit of being cheaper than claws, at least at the current time of this video publication. As for support gems, that is to some extent going to be very build specific, obviously. However, you're typically going to see poison, added chaos damage, void manipulation, deadly ailments, vile toxins, and unbound ailments, as these all directly or indirectly scale poison or ailment damage. For mapping or non-boss content, however, I suggest you replace one of these with lesser or greater multiple projectiles, as it simply leads to a more efficient clearing skill with more projectiles and many more chains. In regards to the skill tree, it is of course, again similar to the support gems, going to be build dependent, which ones you should pick. However, a poison based setup is in most cases always going to want to pick up nodes that increase chaos and ailment damage and multipliers such as atrophy, or in this case, as I use daggers, something like stabbing thirst, which both benefits from the increased damage with daggers but also the increased ailment damage. And if you're claw based, you of course just go with the relevant nodes for that. For fuck's sake, my wife just turned on the blow dryer. I don't know if you guys can hear it. One moment. And if you are using Perfect Agony or the Corralito Flask, crit multiplier nodes can be another great way of scaling the damage besides the obvious poison damage nodes. And as I said earlier, attack speed is always good as it allows you to stack up additional poison effects before they expire. By using nodes such as Exceptional Performance, you can also increase the duration of each poison stack and thus indirectly gain a powerful damage boost. This is however mostly relevant to endgame bosses, and unless your skill tree takes you in that direction, I don't personally recommend spending the points to get it, even though the damage increases can seem tempting. If you're playing as the assassin, the obvious keystones are Noxious Strike and Toxic Delivery, as both via different mechanics greatly scale your potential damage output. The two remaining keystones are somewhat optional. I went with Unstable Infusion and Mistwalker, but Opportunistic and Deadly Infusion are good picks too. So how does the skill feel to play? After all, who cares how the skill looks on paper if it feels terrible to use? My impression of the skill when I first tried it out at level 1 was that it felt like a less satisfying version of Frostblades, but with extra chaining going on. The damage felt okay, and the controls felt reactive and intuitive. It might be because I just recently played Frostblades, but I didn't realize until level 30 or something like that, that unlike Frostblades, the attack range of this skill isn't limited. This means you can pretty much treat this skill as a bow skill in terms of how far away you can hit enemies. The fuck? I think my wife just decided to start redecorating upstairs. 1 second. So you can pretty much treat this as a bow skill in terms of how far away you can hit enemies with your projectile, and having such a long range on the skill is of course of obvious benefit. As long as you keep upgrading your weapons while leveling, you aren't going to run into too much trouble, but like many chain-based skills, the single target does feel rather weak, at least at low levels. I think if I had to re-level with this skill again, I would probably add a 4-linked Viper Strike to help with single target damage for early game progression when it comes to bosses. That said, I doubt the single target damage is going to be an issue later on, and as I've gotten into maps, I can already start to see how it's picking up. For the most part, I don't even bother removing my greater multiple projectile support for regular map bosses anymore. And to give you a tip here, one of the best ways to supplement your damage and smoothen out your leveling experience is by making sure you use the Herald of Agony together with this skill, as this will not only increase your poison damage but also spawn the Agony Crawler, which by itself is a powerhouse of a minion. That helps a ton while progressing, and I suggest linking it to Pierce as well to make the most of it. As for final thoughts, Cobra Lash is a very solid skill that, if you understand how to scale poison damage, should work right from the get-go at level 1, and it should be able to take you all the way into the very end game and past it, if that's possible. You get my meaning. And I am definitely not in doubt that the skill has some amazing end-game damage scaling potential. So if you at first feel like it's not dealing that much damage or it feels a little slow, just wait until you get a little further. The scaling potential really lies and when you start to benefit from those chaos multiplier nodes that, at least if you're playing as the assassin, will greatly benefit from. Overall, I think the skill is enjoyable, it's fast paced, it's fun, and I'm looking forward to continuing my Atlas progression with this skill. Please let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in me making a build guide for you with this setup once I've taken it a little further into the game. If enough people are interested, I'll make it happen. If you found this video useful, then please smash that like button, subscribe for more Path of Exile content, and if you wish to support the channel in a bit more personal way, then consider becoming a member here on YouTube or join as a Patreon on patreon.com. The links can be found in the description. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?